I think back of some of the biggest investments I made in business, in my life, in my skill set, in my mindset. It came from a failure or a loss. And I think that loss for me, I started to reprogram in my mind that it's not necessarily a loss. It's an investment I didn't know I was making at the time, as much as I know that I learned from it. So like if I did something and didn't go back to the drawing table, or I quit, or I gave up, or I didn't, continue to push forward or continue to learn from it, well, then yes, I'd call it a loss. But if I acquired new skills, if I figured out what landmines to dodge next time, if I met someone through the process, if I shared the story of failure and was vulnerable in an opportunity to create deep human connection, and a relationship built faster, built stronger, and that relationship is now a business partner or a referral partner or a friend that's there for me at 3 a.m. when I'm not able to sleep and freaking out about a big speech or presentation or podcast the next day, then was it really a loss? Welcome to the Impact Effect Podcast. I am your host, Jim Morris, and we've got another amazing guest in the house, Phil Treadwell. And man, he's up to some cool stuff. Founder and coach of M1, as well as over 20 years in the mortgage industry. 20 years in the mortgage industry. So we're going to get into some impactful moments. We're going to talk about impact in life and in business. So please help me welcome Phil to the Impact Effect Podcast.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me. This is a cool show, and excited to hopefully share some value with some folks.
Let's go, baby. Let's go. That's what it's all about. Some value, some impact. All right. So every guest, I ask the same question to kick things off. What's the most impactful moment in your life that changed everything for the future?
I've thought about this because there's actually several. But I think the moment that I realized that my upbringing impacted how I lived my life and how I built my business. And what I mean by that was I realized that as a kid, my mom was a teacher and my dad, as a builder, owned his own company. And I was this perfect mix of entrepreneurship meets academia. I had to do good in school, so I read a lot of books. I always had to educate myself, get good grades, because my mom was a teacher, and I grew up in a small town, and you had to. And my dad had this business side where he was, dealing with clients, dealing with partners, building this business. And I had a desire for both. I always had a curiosity, wanted to know about people and travel and learn new things, but I always wanted to find utility. I always wanted a practical way to take this knowledge and either share that knowledge or package it. And I don't exactly remember how old I was or where exactly I was at in my career, but when I realized that moment of I've got these two sides of me that aren't mutually exclusive. You don't have to go the academia route or the blind entrepreneurship route and just have vision with no execution. You can actually use these to build things, to help people. And once I lean into that upbringing and that natural talent that I had for analyzing certain things, all of a sudden it launched my career in a completely different way. Man,
so blending both of those teachings, learnings, experiences from your parents seems to be one of the most impactful moments. When it comes to your upbringing, like were you in a home where you had to be top of your class because your mom was a teacher? Was your dad telling you to take risk and go try things? Like, what was that experience like, man?
It's a good question. No, I didn't have any arbitrary standard put on me. I remember the one and only time I ever got a C on like a progress report or report card. I expected a little bit of sympathy or empathy, and I didn't receive any. So the standard was just excellence. You need to go out and do it. But I have one brother. My brother is 6 years older than I am. So kind of navigating having a brother that much older than you was difficult because he was always so much further in life. And I was fortunate because I got to learn from his mistakes. I got to see those firsthand. But it was always one of those things where I had to be a little bit of an old soul because my parents and my brother being older, I couldn't necessarily just be a little kid. And I don't mean that I wasn't able to be a little kid or whatever, but I also understood that my parents worked really, really hard. And my dad played college baseball, so I kind of grew up playing baseball, but he didn't come to every one of my basketball games or baseball games or whatever sport I was playing because he was out working. But when he was there, I always did a heck of a lot better. So I learned just that sheer work ethic from him. But he's not necessarily this extroverted people person, where my mom, being a teacher, was used to being around people and talking to people. And I got to kind of combine both of those skill sets. And then, my brother is, exactly what you would expect and what you want an eldest child to be, where I'm a little more the black sheep. I took the road less traveled, I guess you could say. Mine had a lot more potholes and speed bumps and curves to it. But it's been interesting because it has allowed me to relate to a lot more people. When you think about from a coaching perspective, or whenever you're getting advice from someone, there's people that we go to get advice from because they've been through some stuff, where if you've never really been anything, if you've not had any major life events or obstacles or things that you've had to overcome, they don't really understand what you're going through, and they can't necessarily give you advice. And it's not that if you do something wrong, that now all of a sudden means you know how to do it right. And so talking to someone that has taken that path or built the business or has the right relationship or whatever, the people that have done it right, obviously you can get good advice on how to go do that thing. But when you're going through something, sometimes those aren't necessarily the way that they're not going to be able to help you get through that thing if they've not necessarily done it themselves. So I've always sought out mentors. I never really thought I was going to be a coach. I kind of call myself the reluctant coach because I've always been a practitioner. I always want to go be doing the thing, whether that was mortgage, real estate. I've owned a craft beer brewery, a media company, recruiting company, all these different things I wanted to go and do. And at some point in my career, I just had a lot of people that were reaching out, and I understood having the impact of both paid coaches and mentors in my life had on my life personally and professionally. And I just kind of fell into it. It's been a lot of fun because now I not only get to build my business, but my business is built by helping other people build their businesses. And I don't know if it's John Maxwell or Albert Einstein, both pretty smart guys, so I don't want to take credit away from either one, but one of them quoted that you don't truly understand something until you can explain it to someone else. And I think that's super important in anything that we do in life or in business, is understanding not just, hey, if I do this, I get this result, or if I go down this path, this will happen. When you really understand the why behind it, you can duplicate it, or you can explain it to someone else and help them with the nuance. So I think that's kind of how I marry those two things together. But there wasn't some weird arbitrary standard. I learned risk from having an older brother that I would, we'd jump off the roof. Great, I'll jump off the roof with you. It was just kind of that blind trust. So I got a good mix of both.
I love it, man. I love it. When you realize blending those two things together and understanding your skill set and where they've come from, what changed for you? What was that pivotal, magical moment? Like, where were you before, and where did you start to trend moving forward?
It's a good question. I think the before and after effect was more when I started my career just in jobs. I did some management. I always kind of laugh. In college, I was a store manager for Blockbuster Video. And anybody that's old enough to be around, we have a little nostalgia around our Blockbuster Video stores. And then I had done some corporate sales, which is a fancy way of saying I was a truck driver recruiter. And so I had kind of a mix. So when I got in the mortgage industry, they were looking for someone with sales and management experience, and I had both, but I didn't know much about the industry. And the reason I went into the industry is I really wanted to take over my dad's company. But he's like, you need to think long and hard before you want to build houses for the next 40 damn years, I think was the exact quote that he used. He said, see what else is out there first. So I really thought I'm going to go find an adjacent industry that will help me in taking over his company. And the guy that I interviewed with was the owner of the company at the time. And he said, if you decide to get in this business, you'll look back at this conversation one day and cuss me, because once you get in it, it's really tough to get out of it. And I've been doing it for, I think, 22 or 23 years. But I share that because when I first got in the business, I just kind of blindly followed what I was supposed to do and what they told me to do and had trained me to do. And easy examples, even if people aren't familiar with my industry, we do home loans for people. If you're buying a home or want to refinance a home, but I followed so closely with what they told me that I only did home purchase loans for people. And a friend reached out, I think I was a year and a half in the business, and said, hey, we're wanting to refinance our house. Can you do that? And I honestly didn't know. And I had to call my boss. And of course, he's laughing at me other than the phone. Of course you can. And here's how you do it. It's like way easier than what you've been doing. And a few years later, as I start kind of building branches, I was still following this roadmap. But when this moment happened and I realized I had some natural talent and ability and my desire to educate myself, not just on guidelines or how the business worked, but about people and relationships and personality styles and communication styles and marketing and sales. And then I realized I also had a good talent of using that as a buffet and taking what I could use and leaving the rest and put my own system in place. That's where my business really grew. If you think about like a bell curve, or we talk about that hockey stick curve where you're increasing and you're growing, but all of a sudden you just have really strong growth. That's where things happened for me, because I understood that all true success principles are the same. Like, if people will understand these different success principles in business and in life, by default, you can become successful. Where the nuance is you have to understand, how does that apply to me? Everyone's different. Everyone has a different market, different personalities, different talents and strengths and weaknesses. They've developed different skills. So as soon as you can figure out how to apply that to you and your business, that's where you can excel in that level. And that's kind of that moment that happened for me, is like, okay, regardless of what industry I'm in or business I'm in or market or, what I'm focusing on within the industry that I am in, I can get results at this. I can do really well at this by just applying these principles to this thing. And that's where I think that the before and after effect was, I was a hard worker. That had always been in there. So I grew and I made money. But when I started building systems and processes and applying the knowledge that I had, and not just kind of sticking my head down and going this roadmap that someone had given me, everything changed.
It makes sense, taking something and running the play until there's an opportunity to show that it works, but then also start to look at it and enhance it to a different, piece of it, or morph it into something bigger and better or quicker or faster or more impactful. It's interesting. I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, and, I've been guilty of this myself, where, we do these things and we don't get the immediate success, and we want to think we're smarter than we are in some cases, definitely in my case, over the years. And we want to change it or morph it or give a reason or an excuse or try something new every couple months. And it's like, dude, like, you've made 20 cold calls, get to 100 before you change the process. And then on, cold call 50 or 55, you close, the next 3 deals. Right. Yeah. And I've seen it so many times over and over. So when you're talking about, the processes and enhancing them and, keeping them consistent, I think that level of consistency plays a major part in success. Now,
it does. So you hit on a couple things that I think are massively important to things I coach on, things I talk about from stage. And the way I'll frame it is that success, however people define that, achieving a goal, monetary success in your life, that's a byproduct, and it comes from consistent and persistent efforts over time. We know what it means to be consistent. We're doing something every day. It doesn't have to be the same amount, but we have to take action and do those things on a daily basis. Persistence is where we get stuck, like you mentioned. And persistence is staying consistent, whether you're getting results or not. Because how often do we stay consistent till we get a result and we think that, okay, now we have a ton of momentum, I don't have to do the same things, and we end up with this roller coaster ride? Or we stay consistent for a while and think it's not working and we stop. So you have to stay persistent in that effort over time, and that time period is different for everyone. And the excuses that you were talking about, I had a mentor one time that said an excuse is just a lie wrapped with a reason. And so whenever I'd make an excuse, he'd look at me and be like, any excuse will do. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, it doesn't matter what excuse you're using. You're just using an excuse. Like it doesn't matter. And he referred a book to me. It's called The Magic of Thinking Big. And there's 3 chapters in it, 2, 12, and 13, that talk about the 3 failure diseases, which are excusitis, detailitis, and procrastination. And we all suffer from these things. And it all comes down to, success and failure aren't opposites. Failure is not the opposite of success. The opposite of success is excuses, because you can become successful from failure, but you can never become successful through those excuses. And I think that that's where people get stuck, is we use these failure diseases, we use these excuses in our mind to justify why we're not taking action. And there's never a situation in business where doing nothing is better than doing something, even if you fail. Because if you do nothing, you get nothing. If you do something, you either get a win and get a result, or you take a loss. But that L in loss is L for learn. We hear it on stage all the time. We hear podcasts of people that failed over and over and over, but they learned what was happening, and that's how they're able to become successful. And it's messed up in our minds, because in school and academia, and this was a differentiation I had to make, in academia, we're taught you can't fail every test, fail every quiz, fail your homework. In academia, you're a quote unquote failure, even if you learned what you got wrong. But that's not how the real world works. Success and failure aren't opposites. They're actually stacked. You go through that. And so that's where I encourage people. You've got to go take action. You've got to jump into that thing. It's not ready, aim, fire. It's ready, fire, then aim. And we get in our heads about it because we're concerned about what people think, or, we're not going to do anything unless we know it's going to work. And I just point to professional baseball. If you have a 300 batting average in professional baseball, you're for sure in the major leagues. You're probably an all-star, maybe a future Hall of Famer, making millions of dollars. Well, for people that don't speak baseball, a 300 batting average means 3 out of 10 times you get a hit, get on base, or hit a home run. 7 out of 10 times you strike out, you fly out, you get thrown out, you go back to the dugout having failed. They're failing 70% of the time in front of the entire world, and they're still one of the best at what we do. So this arbitrary standard in our mind that we can't do anything or take action unless we know it's going to work is a fallacy, and it's just fear.
I couldn't agree more, man. I think when I think back of some of the biggest investments I made in business, in my life, in my skill set, in my mindset, it came from a failure or a loss. And I think that loss, for me, I started to reprogram in my mind that it's not necessarily a loss. It's an investment I didn't know I was making at the time, as much as I know that I learned from it. So like, if I did something and didn't go back to the drawing table, or I quit, or I gave up, or I didn't, continue to push forward or continue to learn from it, well, then yes, I'd call it a loss. But if I acquired new skills, if I figured out what landmines to dodge next time, if I met someone through the process, if I shared the story of failure and was vulnerable in an opportunity to create deep human connection, and a relationship built faster, built stronger, and that relationship is now a business partner or a referral partner or a friend that's there for me at 3 a.m. when I'm not able to sleep and freaking out about a big speech or presentation or podcast the next day, then was it really a loss? And I think we forget to take those other things that come with it and truly look at it as an investment. One of the biggest consulting deals I've done that I walked away from, at first I was like, man, this sucks. This is something that I thought I was going to be doing for much longer. I thought it was going to go a different way. I thought people involved were going to be more in alignment, and it was the opposite. But 2 days later, I realized that if I didn't take that consulting agreement, then I wouldn't have met one of my current business partners, which in turn is someone who has the highest level of integrity, the highest level of skill set, strategic knowledge and thinking and different resources. So when I look back at all of that, I'm like, man, failure can be used in so many different ways. Of course, what you learn from a skill set perspective, but mindset, opportunities, vulnerability, relationships, all of these things come through and align.
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head, because I'm finishing a book right now called What the Uncommon Have in Common. What's the mindset, the habits, the tactics of elite professionals, of top performers in and out of my industry. And uncommon people, elite professionals, they don't even think of successes or failures. To your point, even a failure allows you to learn something, therefore it's a win, or it creates a relationship, or takes you to the next step. So that's exactly what it is. Every action, whether it's fruitful or not, whether it yields a result or not, it was just part of the process. And in that, I coach people a lot on, we've got to get the outcome or the result out of our mind and focus on the process. And in that consulting example you used, okay, well, you didn't get that contract, but what did come from it, right? You got to practice the pitch. You now can assess, what did you do right? What did you do wrong? What could you have done better? What are the relationships I formed out of it? And same way, whether you're posting a video or whether you're having a conversation with someone, if we'll have true assessment, self-awareness, which isn't punitive. It's not about beating ourselves up. It's truly assessing what's going on. When you stop judging yourself, you then remove judgment from other people, right? You have no need to, because there's no comparison. But the point of that is, when you truly assess it and you focus on the process of becoming better, the irony is we turn into the person that the results just happen for. Because everybody's like, oh, I need to make this many phone calls or post this many videos to get this result. And they'll ask me, well, how many or how much? My answer is always more. Because if you're asking the question, then you need to do more. But instead of just doing more, focus on getting better at whatever that thing is. Your conversion is going to drastically increase. But the more important thing is, the person that comes out the other side, having developed this practice or skill, is now the person that results just happen for, because you've done that thing. And so exactly what you're talking about is so true. Uncommon people, elite professionals, they don't think in terms of wins and losses and successes and failures. It's just a term of, this was the thing that I did that led to this. And we can all tell these stories. I can't, even with my own podcast, of how I got Gary Vee on there, or Ryan Serhant, or these different people. It's never a straight line. It was, I went blindly into this thing and took action, and it led to this, that led to this. And it was just all the way around. And people spend so much time trying to formulate a play or a plan that they forget about the overall strategy. The metaphor you use for football, the strategy to win in football is to drive the ball down the field, cross a specific line, and keep the other team from doing the same thing. The plan are the individual plays, but we get so caught up in writing these perfect plays, we forget that's actually not helping us get the ball down the field. The strategy is to win. So we've just got to get out of that and realize anything we're doing and attempting to drive the ball down the field is better than this trick play where you're throwing the ball back and forth, or special formations or whatever else. Just go do, and you'll figure out the rest later.
The football analogy reminds me when, they pitch it wide and they throw it 3 yards back to the guy on the other side of the field, and they think they're going to throw the 50-yard, 70-yard touchdown pass, and they get sacked and they lose 10 yards.
Yep. That's exactly right.
What's a moment in your life where you came up against failure, and what did you learn from it, and how did you use it to navigate where you are today?
There's been a ton of failures, failed marriages, failed businesses, bad financial situations, broken relationships. I mean, unfortunately, I've been through it all, but it's also very fortunate, because no matter what type of person I'm dealing with or client I'm dealing with, good or bad, I can relate to them. There's one of my favorite authors is Seth Godin. He's a brilliant marketing mind. He has a book called Tribes, and we're all part of different tribes. You and I are part of Tribe Podcaster, right? I'm part of Tribe Glasses. You're not. I'm part of Tribe Dads of Daughters Who Play Basketball. And the reason that's important is human connection is around relating to each other. And one of the two easy ways to create trust is to find things in common with people, because we naturally have an element of trust with people that are like us. So I say all that to say, I've been through all kinds of failures, and even in the moment, I knew that, okay, this isn't going well. I failed at this, but there's never a distinct moment where like, okay, I'm a failure. I always looked and said, okay, well, that didn't work. What did I learn from it? What can I take from that experience the next time around? The other thing that I think failure is a positive thing, and it's not that we're trying to fail, but we do have to embrace the failure when it happens, even if we're not trying to fail, because it makes you self-reflect. And that's the more direct answer to your question is the things that have given me the most lift were the biggest failures where I had to look inward. A lot of people that are listening to this podcast or had some success in their life or business in some way, they probably had a natural talent or ability to it, and they wrapped a little bit of skill around it. Well, to your point, we always think we're better than we are. We always think that we're a little smarter than the other person that's in the same situation. And I would say the far majority of the time, that's not the case. So it allows us to kind of self-reflect. And I was a young professional getting in this industry, making a lot of money. I had kids young, got married young. And I was like, I got this whole adulting thing down. I remember at one point in time, my mid-20s, I was making well into the six figures, married with 2 kids, was, in church organizations and professional organizations, and just thought I had the world by the tail. And then within 24 months, I'd lost it all. And, there's been multiple times where things have happened where you get to rock bottom or hit rock bottom or some version that we create, the narrative we create in our mind. Those have been the biggest growth moments for me. And as I get older, what I realize is the smarter that I am, the more I realize how not smart I am. It's the more that I know, the more I realize how much I actually don't know. And I think we need to do that with our ego. As our ego grows, we need to say, no, I need to pull this back, because if we start operating outside of the fundamentals of what got us there, it's all going to be temporary. And the strategy that got you to where you're at is not the same strategy that's going to take you to the next level. And we have to think about what's the next level version of me. The next level version of you doesn't have a bigger ego. They probably have less ego, and they focus on more of the impactful things, the productive things, the meaningful things. And I think that's why when we look at, especially, retired people, older people, people that are the late seasons of life, they're not trying to be social media superstars. They're not trying to flex with their bags and their cars and their trips. They're trying to create human moments because they now have the luxury of looking back and being like, that was awesome, but did it create any fulfillment? Did it create any meaning? And so I'm not trying to get, too philosophical on it. I would say that, for most of us, failure is an opportunity to do some introspection. It's not just mechanical. It's not just tactical. It's, what was my attitude towards this? What was my attitude in general? What mindset can I change going forward? Now, you mentioned my company is M1 Academy, and M1 stands for Mindset First. Mindset's not the only thing that's going to make us successful, but it's the most important thing, because our mindset controls our attitude and our actions. Those are the only 2 things we can control. We can't control the market. We can't control our clients. We can't control our partners. What we can control are the things that we do and how we respond to the things that happen to us. Mindset's the most important thing. And so through failure, that means our mindset drifted and we weren't focusing on the right things. And now we have to realign and just get back on the road.
It's funny because I think there's so many entrepreneurs that have had success, early success, even late success, right? The timeline can be on a different, bandwidth, but they have that success and they stop doing some of the things that got them that success. Or
right.
I've seen in a lot of cases, they double their expense line, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to try new marketing tactics or try new things, and they don't keep that baseline, that foundation of what actually got them there.
Yes.
So I love what you said about that. And then also, what you did to get here isn't going to get you there. So what do you need to pivot? But I think those new things you're doing still cause you to do work, right?
They do.
Pushes you to show up. It
Yep.
still pushes you maybe to stay late in the office sometimes when needed, to, navigate a business that's going to the next level and growing.
Yep.
I think we're in this period of time, this culture where, hard work seems to want to be replaced with automation and AI. And I was talking to someone the other day, and we were using some tools, and it was like, man, like, we're still putting in hours and hours and hours to use these tools the right way, right? Because if you think about, everybody's using this tool, whether maybe it's to generate a website, for example. If you just use the tool, you're going to get the same website that your competition has. You might have some different language. If you don't make it into something that captures leads, that the size of a book a call button based on the psychology behind it, or you just leave it up to AI to put this big clunky thing that people just naturally their eyes surpass, then are you really using the tool to leverage the outcome that you want, or a higher, better, more proven outcome? And I think when it comes to things like AI and automation, there's millions of ways to do it, but it still takes a human to curate it based on your brand, based on your vision, based on your client set, how you want to speak to people, how you want to impact them, how you want to navigate a conversation, what the steps look like. And it was funny because we were looking at each other, and we were talking about the fact that we've put in like 9 hours into this specific project. And of course, we're operating at a higher level, and we're doing things that would take probably 9 days, but we're still staying late in the office. We're still putting the work in to get it to where we know it can go, but it still takes that hard work. It still takes that time. And I think back to your mindset shift with the times we're in, this age of information and artificial intelligence, how much mindset is still consistently important, but also the mindset to not outsource some of the things that are extremely important to get to the next level, to get to the next run on the ladder when it comes to success.
It does. Both of the things that you said there, I'm going to kind of tie them together, because even in my company that I have now, M1 Academy, we're about 3.5 years in. After the first year, we grew really fast. And at that point, I was like, okay, well, here's our core base of business. And I didn't realize there were a ton of people that jumped in because we were the new shiny object, and they jump to the new shiny object every time one of them comes back out. So year 2, I spent, okay, well, this is our base. We're going to grow from here. Now let's focus on scaling. Let's add team members, add the expenses. I made all of the mistakes that I think most entrepreneurs make, even though we're told not to, and we hear it ahead of time till you get in it, because we're different. We have the context, right? All these excuses and reasons we give. I did the same thing, and it took a lot of the next 6 months to year to right the ship, because whenever you're an entrepreneur, especially when you're a solopreneur in the beginning, you have to work in the business and on the business. And I stopped working in the business as much and started working on the business. Well, then there's nothing to work on if you're not also working in it. And I say that because when we tie in this AI piece, there's a lot of things AI can do that humans can do, but it can do better. So a really practical way for people, whether you're an entrepreneur, salesperson, you work in an office, or you sit at home, think of AI. AI is not how you get the result. AI is what you use to go to the result 80% faster. But to your point, you still have to do that other 20%, whether it's beginning, middle, end, or a combination of it. You are in control of how fast you get to it. It doesn't take the work out of it. What it should do is replace red and yellow light activities. And I do a lot of time management with people. Green light activities are income producing, and only you can do them. So how do you delegate or automate or use AI to eliminate more of the yellow and red in your calendar, in your time, so that you can focus on the green things? And that's where we have, not everyone, but most people see AI as, okay, well, that's the solution, or AI is going to replace people. Even in my industry, you can automate and use AI for the loan process, for underwriting, for processing, for valuation, for all these other things. And every human that has access to Google or AI can find out anything they want to know about mortgage, real estate, every detail about what we do, guidelines, but here's what a human wants. another human who's a subject matter expert saying, why does this matter to me? What of all this information I have access to is relevant to me and my situation? And it's not that AI is not going to get better, but we're still communal beings where we want another person who says, yes, I understand your situation. Here's what's important. And so we need to use AI to get us 75, 80% there, and then use the last little bit. You've now still saved most of your time, and you can compound that and stack that and perform at a higher level. But to your point, these solutions, whether it's a SaaS product, whether it's an AI product, whether it's, some other type of technology, it's not so that you can work less. It's actually so that you can work the same amount or more, but you're going to get a higher productivity. Because at the end of the day, no one wants to double their business by working double. We want to have more productivity with the same amount of work, or the same productivity with less work. But most people yield to that one of, well, if I made the same amount of money, but instead of working 50 hours, I can work 15, that'd be perfect. I want to be like Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week. Well, you missed the whole point of Tim Ferriss's book, if that's what your takeaway was. Because what Tim was talking about is, how do I take 40 hours worth of stuff that I used to do and get it down to 4 hours, so that the other 36 hours in the week, I can go be doing more of the 4-hour things. Right? The whole point of that is missed. And that's where people need to realize it's not the result. It just helps you get to the result faster.
Totally, man. I couldn't agree more. And I think too, with the change or scope of work, the expectation rises because everybody has AI tools, right? So a product like a website that is janky or doesn't look great, you could get by. But now you've got to have all the bells and whistles, because a majority of people will have all the bells and whistles. So
right.
The workload increases, the usage of the tools increases, and ultimately it comes back down to the human to human interaction and connection that will get the result that you wish and wanted in your business.
100%.
Man, Phil, thank you so much for just sharing your knowledge and coming on the podcast and giving us some game, man. You were dropping bombs, brother. I
appreciate that, man. I appreciate you having me. This is stuff I'm very passionate about. And, my biggest advice to people is, we've all heard, hey, find someone who's where where you want to be in life, wherever they're at, where you want to be, and then do what they did or learn from them, find out what you want to do. And I think that that's true, but there's context. Part of the context is, you need to find someone who's actually willing to tell you the hard things. Of all these characteristics that I was talking about in the book, what the uncommon have in common, a lot of people ask, what's the biggest thing or the most important thing? And I can't narrow it down to one, but the one thing that's common with everyone, and probably is in the top 3, is successful people, high-performing people, do the things they don't want to do when they don't want to do them. And if anyone is trying to get out of work, get out of activity, get out of, I don't really want to do that, that's the sign that that's what you need to be doing. And so it's not that this isn't worth my time. That's a completely different conversation. Like, this isn't productive but I don't want to do it. You've got to go take action. And most of the time, there are going to be things that you don't want to do. That's why it's worth it. Nothing that's worth anything in life is ever going to be easy. And that's what people need to embrace. We're getting into a society of so many things are easy, as opposed to saying, great, now I don't have to do this stuff and I can focus on the hard things, and that's what's going to make me excel. We want everything to be easy, and that's just not the way it works.
It's not the way the world works, man.
I appreciate you having me. Look forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you, brother.